Gigaman strikes the Warlock. He's flying down and he's crashed into 22nd Street. Another win for the city's heroes. A great loss for taxpayers. I spoke too soon. The Warlock's rising from the ground. He's surrounded by some kind of magic. Gigaman shrinks to meet him, and they're both gone, vanished with a flash of purple light. The broadcaster spat through the muddled transmission of the radio median FM. Joe Mid listened with half of his attention. Prior to the fight between superhero and supervillain, the broadcaster had informed that the weather was fine. Traffic would get him to where he needed to be for his 9 a.m. start, and if he was lucky by the day's end, he could dabble in a hobby or two. The other half was settled on the riveting and dangerous excitement of his job interview at a consulting firm, hoping that there would be enough of an increase in his salary that he could keep the life he currently had without downsizing any luxuries. He sipped his coffee twice. The lukewarm liquid bathed his mouth with the sweet, sugary blanket of a triple-triple. He reminded himself that he would cut back on sugar tomorrow. Not that he needed to. He wasn't fat. He was just a little overweight in the way that most people his age were. A sudden wave brushed through the atmosphere. Despite having rolled up windows, his shirt was tickled, and what few hairs remained on his head were pushed aside as if wind had somehow found its way within his car. Alarming screams exploded around him, alerting Joe into immediate terror, but he was unsure of what he should be terrified of. His skin felt cold, while his throat transmuted into immediate dryness. His eyes gazed right, spotting that most had taken their bodies outside of their vehicles, staring at the sky. In response, Joe craned his neck to do the same. A large crash smashed into the roads ahead. In shock, Joe discovered Gigaman had shattered the highway before him, deafening a chorus of screams with his body and conjuring devastating crushing metal and glass. Holy shit! Holy shit! Joe quivered. He thrust his door open, and mid-swing it ceased its movement, for the car next to him had the same idea, leaving both of their metal casings to smash into one another. Sorry, excuse me, John sputtered loud enough for only his ears to hear it. Both the South and North seemed to believe that the other side was better, for the opposing tides fought to make their way into the other side, bumping through Joe and eventually tearing at his shirt. Sorry, excuse me, Joe yelled. Both his arms flailed outward with a strong push, allowing him to clear the space to get a slight view of what lay ahead. In the south, a giant black cloud had conjured, deafening all voices that it touched. To the north, Gigaman had extended his body to twice the size of a skyscraper, swatting away at the Warlocks, who casted great purple spheres that bounced off Gigaman's bodies, creating raining fire that cascaded to the streets below, igniting cars with pillars of red fire. Deciding anything was better than a mysterious cloud, Joe rushed towards the north, hobbling over car hoods and shifting his body to a sideways position to not take up too much space. Everybody funneled towards a singular escape route, where the ending slope of the highway had been destroyed, forcing a slight jump of a few feet in order to meet the ground below. The disorganized parade of bodies made it difficult as due to its sheer size, he was pushed over the side without his autonomy. As he found recovery, a chorus of screams ignited, and he saw a horde of gray beasts emerge from the concrete, ripping through the set road and crafting gaping holes with the emergence of their silver claws. 6 arms with protruding biceps stemmed from each of their husks, which tore at whatever was in their way. He opted to turn south and accept whatever the gray cloud had for him. He held his breath and embraced, not ready to accept what would come his way, but knowing that he had no choice. He dove to the ground, hopeful that he could find protection by cementing his ears over his hands and circling himself behind a metal cage of a car, taking a deep inhale prior to the pushing gray smoke that bellowed overhead. He closed his eyes as a powerful force of wind invaded his body. His mouth was heated, then chilled, and silence echoed through the atmosphere. His eyes reluctantly fluttered open, his vision slowly prying to reveal that he was now within a completely different environment. He sat on a straight road, one side heading north, the other south, and both couldn't be so different. To go south was a straight and simple line. The road was filled with cars that were the exact same size, colored with muted grays, and moving forward only with slight shifts. To the south, he saw two vehicles, a large red truck and a bright blue sports car, both rapid in speed, suddenly vanishing by the time his eyes shifted towards him. What? What the fuck? Joe whispered as his trembling body stood. Alone, are we? A familiar voice shouted. He recognized it as he had heard it many times before, but Joe was completely unsure where, for it blended between a terrifying deep mockery and a high-pitched squeal. Where are superheroes when you need them? The voice mocked, spreading through high and low winds. A purple explosion manifested within the sky. Beginning with a star, and suddenly taking the form of a man donned in a purple robe with a long black beard which covered the bottom end of his chin. Instantly, Joe recognized him. The Warlock. The Warlock's body instantly elongated, hovering inches away from Joe while his form shifted. His long beard transmuted into a mustache that was yet to be completed that sprouted over his upper lip. The hair on his chin was very much the same, patchy with great distances between hairs. His checks were made round and red. His body was large, and a dark black clip-on tie sprung from his neckline. It was dotted by a rainbow on one side, and the other had a similar tacky caliber. For it showed black smiling stars and the phrase, "Reach for the stars." "B. Brian?" Joe stuttered, realizing that either the supervisor at his old job was the Warlock. His trembling hand reached for any kind of escape, discovering that Hazhand had managed to grip a nearby brick. "Brian? Your worst fear is a man called Brian?" the Warlock questioned. He tilted his head to the glass window behind John, allowing them both to see that he had noticed the appearance he had taken. And pushing past all fear, Joe realized how far he had sunk. Joe screamed. His hand already having grazed a brick, he smashed it into Brian's face, and the Warlock exploded outwardly in thousands of colors, which invaded John's eyes, forcing him to close them again to avoid their powerful light. It felt as if he could hear the sounds of torturous screams, clashing steel, whining horses, and vibrating machinery, all of which quickly dissipated. Joe lowered his trembling hand and quickly opened his eyes, ready for another obstacle. He had returned to his original position as when the gray cloud had surrounded him, but the sky was clear except for the occasional cloud that swam against the backdrop. Agony shocked his upper arm, tapping away as a painful reminder of all he had been through. Observing his surroundings, Joe found it hard to believe where he was, wondering if it was some kind of a secondary illusion. It could have been an hour, or it could have been half, a quarter, or double the length. Speeding above him were a few hero. He always liked watching from afar, but he had other things to do. Ensuring that he made his way to work on time wasn't one of them.